The night I bought my house, I swore it was finally mine. But 2 weeks later, I stood frozen, staring at my phone screen. There was my sister Clarissa, lounging in my living room, raising a glass, and calling herself the owner. In that moment, I realized the cruelest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from family who believe your sacrifices belong to them. My name is Matilda Granger, and this is how my silence turned into war. I can still feel the weight of that pen in my hand as it scraped across the last page. My pulse hammered in my chest while the papers slid back into their folder, and the keys dropped into my palm. Cold, solid, heavy. They didn't just jingle, they landed with the gravity of a medal earned after years of grinding through battles no one else ever saw. I stayed in the driver's seat longer than I meant to, staring through the windshield at the little house on the lake. The porch sagged a little with age. The paint on the trim was faded, and the maple trees out front tossed shadows across the grass like they'd been waiting for me. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. Every hour I'd worked late, every holiday I'd skipped, every time I'd swallowed my pride at a family table, it was all right there in the bite of the key between my fingers. The instinct to call someone surged for a moment, but I smothered it. I knew better. Good news in my family never stayed good for long. Clarissa had a way of twisting joy into duty, turning hard-earned victories into bargaining chips for herself and her kids. I wasn't going to hand her this moment. I pressed the keys tighter until the ridges dug into my skin. This was no longer about proving myself to anyone. This was about drawing a line, one that couldn't be crossed. For once, there would be no debate, no guilt, no demands. This time, it was mine. That dinner in Boston has never left me. The table was heavy with platters of roasted meat, the air thick with garlic and smoke, silverware scraping against plates louder than any laughter. I sat with my fork halfway to my mouth, my heart pounding, before I finally let the words slip out. I'd been saving for years, and I was ready to buy a house. At first, silence, then a soft chuckle. Clarissa leaned back in her chair, eyes glinting, lips curling into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. Even if you managed it, you wouldn't keep it. What would you need all that space for? You're alone. My kids are the ones packed into one bedroom. They need a house more than you ever will. Her words landed like hammer blows, each one meant to shame. Around the table, adults nodded like she'd spoken something noble. The kids muffled laughter behind their hands. I sat frozen, my napkin crumpled in my fist, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Not a single voice rose in my defense. I stayed long enough to push food around my plate, then left before dessert. Outside, the wind cut through me, but the cold inside my chest was sharper. That night, as I walked to my car, I swore if I ever signed those papers, if I ever held a key of my own, they would never be the first to know. Walter introduced himself with the steady bearing of a Navy man, broad shoulders, clear eyes that missed nothing. At first, his warmth put me at ease, but days later, his voice carried across the yard, quieter this time. "Someone was around your porch yesterday. A woman!" I froze, the hair on my neck prickling. He described her, brown hair, heavy build, middle-aged. My stomach knotted instantly. Clarissa. How could she know? I whispered more to myself than to him. I hadn't shared the address. Walter's gaze didn't waver. "She tried the handle," he said. "I thought you should know." The words cut clean through me. In my mind, I saw Clarissa rolling a suitcase through my front door, announcing to everyone that this house was for the family. I wrapped my hands around a mug of coffee later, gripping it so hard I thought it might break. For the first time, the house I'd dreamed of as sanctuary felt like contested ground. The stillness of the lake outside my window didn't soothe me, it warned me. My peace was already under attack. I knew that SUV the moment I turned the corner, parked bold as brass along my curb. It might as well have had Clarissa's name painted across the side. My pulse sank, and before I even stepped out of my car, I spotted her silhouette in the doorway. She didn't knock. She didn't wait. The door creaked open, and there she was, smiling wide, sweeping in like she had been expected. Her boys lumbered behind, shoulders hunched but clearly comfortable, and her friend trailed close, carrying a tote bag as though she were moving in. "Beautiful!" Clarissa exclaimed, spinning slowly, eyes sweeping over my living room. "This is exactly the kind of home our family should have." I blocked the threshold, shoulders squared, but she brushed past me with the same entitlement she had carried since childhood. In the kitchen, she tugged open cabinets, flicked her fingers across the countertops, and nodded as though she were touring a model home. "You can't just walk in here," I said, forcing the tremor out of my voice. She shot me that crooked smirk. "Oh, stop being so serious. One person doesn't need all this. It only makes sense to share it." The words coiled in the air, thick as smoke. I stayed still, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a fight in front of her audience. Eventually, she ushered her group out, tossing a parting glance that felt like a dare. When the silence returned, I noticed it. The kitchen drawer wasn't flush, the one where I kept my spare keys. My fingers tingled as I pulled it open. The keys were there, but the air felt different. Something had been touched that shouldn't have been. I spread the keys across the counter under the light. That's when I saw it, on the front door key, a faint scratch along the groove, not deep, but unnatural, like the scar of something pressed too hard against it. My stomach turned. This wasn't wear and tear. This was intent. I'd heard stories from security staff at the hospital, thieves carrying soft plastic or wax, pressing keys quickly to make molds, then cutting copies in minutes. The realization burned through me. She hadn't just wandered. She had tried to claim my house at the molecular level, through its very lock. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the laptop open, replaying the doorbell camera history. My throat went dry as her face appeared, grainy in the glow of the porch light. Clarissa stood there, shoulders hunched, fumbling with something in her hand. She tested the lock, glanced over her shoulder, and then walked away fast. I froze the image. Her profile tilted toward the street. Rage surged, hot and sharp, but I forced it back down. Years of training taught me that anger is noise, discipline is survival. I returned the keys to the drawer, memorizing every notch, every mark. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was evidence. Leaning against the wall in the dark, I whispered the lesson that had kept me alive through harsher nights than this. This perimeter is mine. Anything unsecured will be taken. The hotel ballroom where the conference was held buzzed with chatter, but my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Walter's name flashed across the screen. His voice was sharp, urgent. "There are cars lined up all over your driveway. Lights on, music blasting. Tell me you rented the place out." My stomach dropped. I fumbled open the security app, and the feed filled my screen. My living room, was packed wall to wall. Strangers holding plastic cups, shoes grinding into the rug I'd picked out with care. And there she was, at the center of it all, Clarissa. She lounged in my armchair, one hand curled elegantly around a glass of red, her voice carrying even through the phone speaker. "Welcome to our new home." I felt the blood drain from my face. Children tore up and down the stairs, their shrieks rattling the walls. Her friend unpacked trays of food across my new counters, hands greasy against surfaces I hadn't even broken in yet. I bit my lip until I tasted iron. Every hour of overtime, every check I'd saved, every dream I'd whispered to myself in silence, it was all being trampled under the pounding bass of a stolen party. Then, the twist came. I heard her, clear as day. "My sister left this house to the family. She doesn't need it. She's alone." The words hit harder than any insult. This wasn't just trespassing. It was a declaration. She wasn't pretending anymore. She was claiming. The hotel room felt suffocating. My phone screen glowed on the nightstand, showing the chaos back home. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. Inside my head, two voices battled. One whispered, "Stay quiet. Don't drag the family into scandal. Let it go." The other was colder, clipped. The voice discipline had carved into me. "Secure the perimeter. Neutralize the threat." Memories surged like a flood. Clarissa turning my savings into a punchline at dinner. The loans she'd signed under my name. The countless times she decided my life was her resource. Every slight, every insult, every theft echoed now in the laughter coming from my stolen living room. I picked up the phone and dialed. The line clicked. 911, what's your emergency? My throat was dry, but my words came sharp. There are intruders in my home. I'm watching them on my security cameras. They're family, but they don't have permission. The operator pressed for details, but I barely heard. My eyes were glued to the feed. Clarissa had risen to her feet, sliding into my chair at the dining table. She raised her glass again, a smug smile spreading across her face as if the house had already been signed over. I whispered into the silence of the hotel room. Steady this time. Not this time. Not ever again. My phone buzzed so hard it nearly slid off the nightstand. I grabbed it, breath caught in my chest. The live feed from my security cameras lit the room, glowing in eerie pulses. Blue and red lights flashed across my porch, painting the siding in violent color. The police were here. The front door swung open, and one of the teenagers who had been stomping up and down my stairs swaggered toward the officers, grin plastered across his face. He waved them off like they were uninvited guests at his party. Then, in one swift motion, his arm was twisted behind his back, and the sound of handcuffs snapped shut under the wash of patrol lights. His bravado vanished in an instant. Inside, chaos exploded. Clarissa shot up from my armchair, her face blotched crimson. She jabbed her finger wildly, shouting above the stunned murmurs. "This is our family's home. My sister doesn't need it all to herself." Her words cracked through the speakers, shrill, insistent, carrying every ounce of entitlement she had weaponized all my life. I couldn't tear my eyes away. My fingers gripped the phone until my knuckles blanched, my heartbeat rattling against my ribs like a war drum. Yet my eyes stayed dry, steady. This wasn't just a break-in. It was the final escalation of a battle I had been fighting for years in silence. And tonight, I was done bleeding quietly. People scattered in every direction. Some bolted for the door, slipping past officers only to be pulled aside in the yard. Others froze, hands lifted in feigned innocence. A few children wailed, their cries clashing with the sharp bark of police commands. The music had cut off, but the echoes of bass still seemed to reverberate in my chest. And Clarissa, she refused to move. Even as officers stepped toward her, she planted her feet in the middle of my living room, her voice trembling but defiant. "She doesn't deserve this place. She's alone. She's selfish. This house is for us, not her." The words hissed out like venom, filling my empty rooms with poison. I sat alone in the sterile hotel room, the glow of the phone the only light against the dark walls. My hands trembled, but not with fear. It was fury. Yes, but deeper than that. It was resolve, hardening into something immovable. One by one, the officers guided them out. My house emptied, stripped of the laughter that wasn't mine, the feet that had no right to pound across my floors. The final slam of the door rang through the speaker, echoing like a gavel in a courtroom. On the screen, the living room lay still. The armchair Clarissa had claimed as her throne was toppled sideways, its shadow stretched long across the floorboards. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and the words formed soundlessly on my lips. Not again. Not this time. Silence filled the hotel room, heavy and absolute. For the first time, it wasn't the silence of surrender. It was the silence of a battle won, and a vow made. The walls were painted a dull gray, the kind that swallows warmth whole. Overhead, the fluorescent light buzzed faintly, humming against the silence. The metal chair beneath me was cold, the table colder. Across from me sat Clarissa, mascara smeared, her eyes rimmed red, the corners of her mouth twisted into something between a plea and defiance. She reached across the table suddenly, her hands grasping for mine. "Please, it was just a misunderstanding. I only did it for the kids." Her voice cracked, raw from shouting, but I heard the familiar cadence of manipulation hiding beneath. I pulled back slowly, steadying my breath. No, you did it for yourself. The officer cleared his throat and set a clear evidence bag in front of me. Inside was a duplicated key, the plastic mold residue still clinging to its edges. Next came the printed screenshots, Clarissa's figure captured on my porch, her hand fumbling with the lock. And finally, Walter's signed statement. Each item landed with a soft thud on the table, but together they roared. I lifted my eyes. Clarissa's face drained pale, her lips parting without words. The friend she'd dragged into this mess was seated further down the hall, already confessing. She had admitted that Clarissa boasted about the family house, insisting I was only letting her borrow it. Each word felt like a nail hammered deeper, pinning the truth in place. I had suspected. I had felt it in my gut. But suspicion wasn't enough. Now, I had proof, and proof meant this was no longer a family squabble. It was theft. It was trespass. It was crime. The officer's gaze fixed on me. Do you want to press charges? My heart stuttered for a second. This was the moment. For years, I'd swallowed pride, carried burdens that weren't mine, told myself keeping peace was better than setting boundaries. But looking at her now, I saw no regret, no apology, only fear. The fear of finally being exposed. My fingers closed around the pen, heavier than it should have been. The black ink spread across the page, smooth, permanent, a line drawn once and for all. Clarissa broke then, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You're destroying this family," she wailed, her voice shattering in the sterile room. I looked at her, my voice calm but cutting like glass. "No, you destroyed it. I'm just refusing to carry the wreckage anymore." The words hung there, final, echoing louder than her sobs. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being cornered. I was the one drawing the line. And nothing, not blood, not guilt, not her tears, was going to erase it. The locksmith came within days, his tool belt jangling as he worked his way from door to door. I trailed behind him, steady, like a sentry making rounds. Old brass tumbled into a bucket. New steel gleamed in its place. When he finished, I slipped the fresh key into the lock. The bolt slid across with a sharp, decisive click. That sound rang louder than any applause. It was final, absolute. My boundary had been redrawn, and this time, no one was crossing it. By evening, the air carried the smell of leaves crisping in the fall. Walter crossed the road, a kitchen towel folded around a warm loaf. He didn't offer platitudes, didn't probe with questions. He set the bread in my hands, then lowered himself into the chair beside me on the porch. The lake burned orange with sunset. We sat without needing words. After a long pause, he nodded once. "You did the right thing." I smiled, small but certain, and lifted my mug. The coffee was strong, almost bitter, yet it steadied me. The breeze caught the edge of the towel, carrying cinnamon into the cooling dusk. For the first time, I inhaled without feeling weighed down. The phone on the railing buzzed. Clarissa's name glowed on the screen, insistent, sharp. I let it ring until it silenced itself. My chest didn't tighten. No guilt, no dread, just stillness. I turned toward the house. The siding glowed faintly in the fading light. Windows reflecting the sky. Porch steady beneath my feet. Every brick, every door, every bolt was proof of the hours I had worked, the discipline I had carried, the sacrifices I had made when no one else saw or cared. This house was no longer just a structure. It was the embodiment of a promise kept to myself. The silence deepened around me. No longer heavy, no longer suffocating. It wasn't the silence of someone swallowing pain at a family dinner table. It wasn't the silence of watching my life picked apart piece by piece. This silence was chosen. Owned. I leaned back, the mug warm in my palms, my eyes on the water catching the last blaze of day. Inside my chest, the truth settled with clarity. This house is the final line I've learned to defend. And this silence, it doesn't mean surrender. It means freedom. For the first time in years, I believed it. For the first time, I was free. and for the first time, I believed it.